Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Nikhil. Okay, let's start off so that we can make the best of the time that we have available. uh, I had done, sorry, I had done an introduction to Hans Gadamer, and I told you that Gadamer uh, is someone who disagrees with the methodological hermeneutics that were suggested by uh, Wilhelm Dilthey. Dilthey talked about an objective mind, and the objective mind is the ability of the reader, who technically is called the exegete. Exegete, the interpreter reader is called exegete, and the process of interpretation itself is called exegesis. 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 Okay, the process is exegesis. The person who's doing it is the exegete. And what uh, Dilthey says is that the exegete should uproot himself from his cultural context, his social context, his political context, and go into the uh, time of the writer that you're reading. He says a book is not a finished product. Everything that the book is trying to convey is not there in the book. Therefore, you have to study that book in the period of history in which it was written. So this is called the text in context, or the ideas in context methodology. And Dilthey said you have to go and think like the author. If you're writing about Plato, think like Plato. Don't think like yourself. Okay, and I give you this example of Karl Popper, who makes the cardinal mistake of calling Plato a totalitarian thinker, because he says Plato is an enemy of open society. The historical error that a brilliant man like Karl Popper, Karl Popper, Karl Popper, the historical mistake that he is making is he is taking a 20th century phenomenon called an open society, and he's taking it and using it on Plato. In that particular time, there was no such thing as a distinction between the personal and the public domains of activity. Neither was the individual first and society second, because if you see Aristotle, Aristotle says what is good for society is good for the individual. So those are the days when people believed in common good. Okay, they believed in common good and not individual good. But in the modern period, we have the idea of what is good for society need not be good for me. Okay, so the individual comes first. So Aristotle and Plato will tell you without a society, there is no individual. The fact that there is a society, there is an individual, it assumes automatically that there is a society. Okay, so please remember the example I gave you. Can you have a soldier without having the army? Okay, you say There is no institution called the army, but there are soldiers. Can you have that? You can't. A soldier is a soldier because the army is there. So it is the army, the collective, that comes first, and the soldier, the individual, comes next. This is what we find in Plato's and Aristotle's time. But by the time we come to the modern period, and especially the 20th century, we become individualists, wherein we don't believe in the idea of common good. We believe in the idea of individual good. We do not prioritize society over the individual. We prioritize the individual over the society. And we say, if there is no individual, there is no society, which means that society is nothing but an aggregation of individuals. And that is the significance of social contract, which I shall talk to you when we go to the contractualists. Okay, but this is the main point you have to remember. In this particular context, Karl Popper is calling Plato an enemy of open society, and that becomes an anachronism. An anachronism is breaking the time principle. Chronos in Greek is the time principle, and chronology is following a timeline. Okay, when you break the timeline, if you say Gandhi had a fight with Plato, okay, that is an anachronism. Gandhi is a 19th and 20th century figure. He couldn't have fought with Plato. Where would he have fought? So that is an anachronism. And that is the mistake that Karl Popper is making. He is creating an anachronism. So in this way, if you look at it, it does seem Dilthey is right. But Cardamomer's objection is, if a thinker is somebody who's rooted in his time, he is reacting to things that are his reality, then similarly, the interpreter or the exegete is somebody who is primarily rooted in his own reality. Okay, he's somebody who is rooted in his own reality. So how can you say you uproot yourself from your reality? Because you are defined by your reality. Who you are is defined by the society, the culture, the politics, the economics, all of these things that are around you. These define your attitudes. You may agree or disagree with the things that are around you, but you're constantly agreeing or disagreeing with your immediate reality. If you're a Modi Bhakt, then you will say Modi is somebody who is the greatest prime minister that this country has had. If you are against the BJP, you see it as a communal party, then what do? You say Modi created a pogrom, POGROM, which is mass killing of people in the year 2001, 2002. So, okay, so people who are against him talk about that. So whether you are a supporter or an opponent, it is your reality that you are basically addressing yourself to. So the thing that we find, in Gadamer is the idea that just as the writer of a text or the creator of an idea is rooted in his time, the interpreter or the exegete is also rooted in his own time. So he says, whatever people read, they read books of the past actually, so that they can uh, you know try to understand how it was in the past. But he says you cannot uproot yourself, right? Now take the case of democracy. For us now, democracy is very, very sacred. Okay, we can't go by the idea that democracy is something which is very bad. We can't go by that idea. We believe that democracy should be preserved under any circumstances. Okay, but look at the Greeks. When we were in school, we were all taught that there was democracy in Greece. The fact of the matter is there was no democracy in Greece. Okay, and Athens, which is often cited as the polis, P-O-L-I-S, which had direct democratic practice, didn't really have democracy at all, direct or indirect. Okay, if you look at what Plato says, Plato is an Athenian, and he says democracy is the rule of the mob. Demos is the mob, rule of the mob. Cracy is ruling. So democracy basically is mob rule or mobocracy. Aristotle agrees. Though he disagrees with Plato on several counts, he does agree with him here, but we'll go into their debates when we get into that. So please remember that till the modern period, democracy was never held as a good form of governance. It is John Locke, the English philosopher, who made democracy something which one should seek. But again, the kind of democracy John Locke talks about does not have universal adult franchise. Okay, he's only talking about giving the power of elections and choosing a sovereign to only those people who have a certain amount of property. So he said only the propertied class can become stakeholders in a democracy. Okay, it was, and if you look at the history of England, till 1872, there was no such thing as universal adult franchise. Even in 1872, it was the men who were given the suffrage or the franchise, which is the right to vote, but women were given the right to vote only in 1928. In America, women didn't vote till 1935. Even today in America, 538 people vote for a president. 538 people. It's not even a democracy. Okay, it's not a democracy. Now, if you take Switzerland, it didn't allow its women to vote till 1973. Okay, so this whole thing called democracy set in very, very gradually, and in many instances, democracy is all trickery. I actually wrote a book on that. If any of you is interested, I can give you a copy of the book. You can read it. I say that my argument in the book is that democracy is not a solution. Democracy is a problem. Let me give you a simple example. Let us say there is a constituency of 100 people. Two people are contesting, A and B. All 100 vote, let us say. Okay, all 100 will vote. In that, 51 vote for the candidate A, 49 vote for candidate B. Now we have a simple majority system across the world. So what happens? Candidate A is declared the winner. Okay, if candidate A is declared the winner, then he's representing all those 49 people, which is half of the constituency that voted against him. He's representing them also. They said, we don't want you as our representative. But despite that, he represents them. Right? So that is one of the problems of democracy. So where is the representation to those people who didn't vote for him? Okay, and let me give you a very interesting piece of statistic. In the second term of the UPA, second term, the Congress had 23% of the votes polled across the nation. And mind you, there is no 100% voting. Voting did not cross 70 anywhere, 70%. In that, they had 23%. And their other allies who were there, who were regional satraps, okay, and these people had even fewer votes from their constituencies because they are only in particular states. DMK was a constituent. Do you find DMK anywhere else? You don't. So it was something like 31%. 31% of the country voted for the UPA, and it was governing. Okay, 31%. So 69% either didn't, has a category of people who didn't think it is worth voting. Also, even among those who voted, people voted against these people. Okay, but they formed the government. All right. So anyway, so these are our concerns. So that is the reason why we want to study what is democracy, what is social contract, what is constitutionalism, because we want to understand our own history. We want to understand our own society. We want to understand our own politics. And you cannot do this without going into history. That is what Dilthey says. Gadamer agrees. But what Gadamer says is that Dilthey is wrong in believing that you can uproot yourself from your reality and become Plato or Aristotle or Hobbes or Locke. You can't. You can't. Prashant will be Prashant. Okay. And Prashant will want to read these people in order to understand the evolution of the concept of democracy. He will read these people with that intent. And who is Prashant? Prashant is an Indian. Prashant is a South Indian. Prashant comes from a certain section of society. All these things play a role in our trying to understand the past, because this is baggage you cannot shed. You can't say, I don't have this baggage. No, it comes with you. Whether you like it or not, it comes with you. And that is what Gadamer says. But he says Dilthey was right to the extent that you cannot arbitrarily interpret history. Okay, don't interpret it like Karl Popper did. Dilthey, I'm sorry, Gadamer definitely says that what Karl Popper was doing was not a very great thing, calling Plato an enemy of an open society and calling him a totalitarian thinker. Totalitarianism, please remember, is a 20th century phenomenon. Okay, it came with the Nazis, N-A-Z-I, pronounced Nazi, N-A-T-Z-I. You have to pronounce it that way, Nazi. And Nazi is actually short for National Socialist Party. Okay, that's Nazi. This was in Germany. At the same time, you had the Fascist Party in Italy. Okay, it is written F-A-S-C-I-S-T, but it is not pronounced fascist. Okay, it is pronounced fascist. Why? Because the root of the word is fasce, F-A-C-H-E. What does fasce mean? If you take a bunch of twigs, broken branches of a plant, okay, you put them together like this and tie them up, then you can't break the sticks. If it is one stick, easily you can break it. So fascism did not have a bad name in the beginning. When Benito Mussolini actually floated the fascist party in the second decade of the 20th century, quite a few people, including Marxists like Antonio Gramsci, Gramsci, people like Gramsci also believed that it is a good idea to have a unified Italian society. He believed that. But when fascist party became dictatorial, had no respect for human rights, that is when people started leaving the fascist party. And those who left the fascist party, including Antonio Gramsci, they were jailed. And the best of Gramsci's writings come from his prison notebooks. While he was in jail, he contemplated about Marxism, he contemplated about fascism. So fascism got a bad name thanks to Benito Mussolini and his band of followers who made it a dictatorial and inhuman way of ruling, which is what the Nazis, though it's National Socialism, it was neither socialist, it was probably national, but they put the Jews in gas chambers, experimented upon them as if they were guinea pigs. Okay, so if you look at all those things, then you do see that there is something fundamentally wrong with totalitarian rule, because that deprives people of their rights, human rights. It deprives people of their dignity, and it also deprives people of their life. Because if you go against, or if you rather went against the fascist party, or if you went against the Nazi party, then you were executed. There's no other in between. You were simply executed. Okay, so that is totalitarianism, and that's a 20th century phenomenon. So how can you say Plato was a totalitarian thinker? So Gadamer does sympathize with the idea that history should be understood. But he says this whole thing of transplanting yourself from your time into the time of the author of a book or the progenitor of an idea, that is something he says is not possible. So he says the objective mind, which Dilthey talked about in the methodological uh, hermeneutics, which is empathy, your ability to be, your ability to understand the other. Okay, Verstehen, I hope you remember that, Verstehen, Verstehen. He says, Verstehen, empathy is not possible. Okay, it is simply not possible because you can never, leave alone somebody in the past. Okay, leave alone somebody in the past. I cannot put myself in Nikhil's shoes. Okay, Nikhil is a millennial. I am an old man. All right. I was quite stunned when I read that people born in my time are called the Generation X. I thought Generation X was much, much later. But even we people are called Generation X. That doesn't matter. It's a stupid thing to talk about anyway. But I cannot put myself in your shoes. Okay, because what is your family? What is your reality? Okay, what are your goals, aims, and aspirations? All these things are defined by the context in which you are. If your parents are rich, then you can possibly think of going abroad, writing the SAT, Scholarly Aptitude Test for America, and you can go abroad and do your undergraduation there, which is what most of my friends are doing. India has become so unwanted. If you have money, and my friends all have huge truckloads of money, I'm the only one without it. I'm also the one without children, so I don't have a problem. So these people are the ones who have sent their children not just to do some post-graduation or PhD, but even to do a BA course. Now I'm seeing people are even being sent to schools in England and the United States. People want to send them to Eton, Harrow in Britain. Now that is a reality I just cannot understand. I can't understand how these people are making so much money. Seriously, they are my friends, but I don't know from where their wealth has come. Because when we grew up, we all looked very similar. And today I see myself not having that wealth. I'm not jealous. I'm just pointing out something. I don't have that wealth, whereas these people have. Where did it come from? Because they also went through the same education process that I went through. Okay, but their situation is different. So I cannot even, leave alone putting myself in some historical figure's shoes, I cannot even put myself in my friend's shoes. I cannot put myself there. So Gadamer says that there is no way you can uproot yourself and become someone else. Then is there no necessity for hermeneutics? Gadamer says there is a necessity for hermeneutics, but you have to change the way in which you look at them. Don't look at them like Dilthey did. He says hermeneutics should not be seen as methodological. Okay, not a methodological exercise at all. He says it's a philosophical exercise, okay, which is dealing with ideas. When you say something is a philosophical exercise, you're primarily making a claim that you're dealing with ideas. Okay, and he says when you're dealing with an author who's from the past, and if you're dealing with a text that is from the past, an idea that is from the past, then you have to be sensitive. You have to be extremely sensitive to the fact that this idea may not be, may not carry the meanings to those people in the past as the meanings it carries to you today. Democracy, we say, is sacred. If somebody violates democracy, we'll say we can't take it. So Gadamer says, no, it isn't as simple as that. You have to understand that at one time people shunned democracy. Why did they shun democracy? Okay, you have to understand that. But he says this is where, by understanding the idea, you walk halfway and the idea comes halfway, or the writer comes halfway. And this is what he calls fusion of horizons. What Dilthey called objective mind, Gadamer calls fusion of horizons. And he says that the hermeneutic is never complete, because Dilthey said there is an original meaning that can be retrieved. But Gadamer says there is no original meaning that can be retrieved. Okay, he says there is no original meaning that can be retrieved. An Indian born as a millennial will look at the whole idea of democracy in a particular way, and that is completely different from a millennial who was born in the US. Okay, he could be a person of Indian origin, but he doesn't think like you, because the cultural milieu in which he grew is the US. So he'll approach democracy from that angle. Okay, so people interpreting the idea of democracy, interpreting Plato in the 12th century, even the Christian thinkers praised Plato. They were called the Neoplatonists. Okay, and people like St. Thomas Aquinas, whose philosophy is called Thomism, Thomism, but pronounced Thomism. He was called the Christianized Aristotle. Okay, he wanted Aristotle's ideas. He took them. But Hobbes will reject Aristotle because he comes a few centuries later. Most definitely, John Locke rejects Plato and Aristotle completely. He rejects them. And in Germany, Immanuel Kant will reject both Hobbes and Locke, while the Anglophone world accepts them as great thinkers. Kant says K-A-N-T, Immanuel written I-M-M-A-N-U-E-L. Immanuel Kant basically says that both Hobbes and Locke have created a system of thought in which there is no place for morality. Okay, so he says One has to re-imbue society with morality. This is something that even Rousseau does. We said the three social contractualists, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We said three social contractualists. But Rousseau is not like the other contractualists. Rousseau is not an individualist, whereas Hobbes and Locke, despite their differences, are individualists. But Rousseau is not an individualist. Rousseau believes in collective good, common good. Rousseau is against nation states, which is what John Locke was for. Rousseau believed in city states. He believed in direct democracy. Locke did not believe that there should be democracy which is given to everyone. Democracy is only to the property class. Rousseau says give everyone in a city state the democratic right. So you see, a social contractualist like Rousseau is disagreeing with a fellow social contractualist like Locke and Hobbes. And today when we look at Rousseau, maybe we disagree with Rousseau. The idea of the general will, which is the social contract in Rousseau, we disagree with that today. Maybe people who come after us, certainly after me, will look at these things in a slightly different way. They'll look at it in a slightly different way. The entire school of pragmatism that came up in America with John Dewey, D-E-W-E-Y, John Dewey and Richard Rorty, R-O-R-T-Y, they believe in the idea of fuzzing the lines of history. In fact, Rorty uses the term fuzzies. He says we are fuzzies. Okay, we do not believe that there is a thing called objective knowledge. All knowledge is subjective. It depends upon the exegete and his cultural moorings and how he likes things to be. So the philosophical hermeneutics of Gadamer are those which will say that there can be many interpretations of the same person and the same book. So Derrida talked about infinite deconstructions of the meaning of a book or the main ideas of a philosopher. Infinite deconstruction. What Gadamer is saying is you can have infinite reconstructions because the task of the hermeneutic is never complete. And because it is never complete, you can have infinite reconstructions. All of them are valid unless they are totally oblivious to history. All of them are valid. So we'll wind up with this whole thing tomorrow. I just want to do the slide, run through these things tomorrow, and then we'll go on to other things. So thank you very much. And maybe we need an extra classes